In 1977, I was a 23-year-old Air Force NCO that was stationed in rural Missouri. A friend and I planned a 2-night wilderness camping trip to Devil's Den in northeast Arkansas. Late on the evening of our first night out, we discussed killing our campfire and going to the tent for the night. That's when my friend noticed 3 bright stars low on the western horizon. They were bright and formed a tight triangle. We were arguing about what it could have been when it moved. It rotated as if on an axis and began an ascent into the night sky. It was a crystal clear night with a billion stars. As this triangle climbed higher, it grew in size. The area inside the triangle was jet black, much darker than the surrounding night sky. As it passed over a field of stars, they would blink out and then blink back again when it had passed. We were not the least bit frightened. I recall a sense of calm washed over us, actually. It was almost like sedation. We were camping on a summit in a meadow, and this thing was heading in our direction. In a short while, it was directly over our heads, and it was enormous. It was a city block long on all 3 sides and 5 stories tall, as large as an office building. There were light panels on each point that ran from top to bottom, and there were hundreds of windows, and about a third of them were brightly illuminated. We could see movement and shadows behind them. It stopped and hovered in midair 30 feet off the meadow floor. There are gaps in my memory, and it doesn't play out in my mind as a seamless narrative, but rather diced up into pieces of memories. We were on board this enormous spacecraft and standing frozen. All I could move was my eyes. There were smaller gray beings herding us about. I saw a taller gray entity about 6 feet tall. He was humanoid-shaped and seemed to be in charge of these things. As I strained my eyes to the hard left, by happenstance he turned his head to the right and we locked eyes. In a millisecond, I felt it was scanning me. I felt naked. It was like it knew all of my thoughts, plans, and memories. Behind his eyes, I could perceive nothing except intelligence. This thing was raw intellect. I was in no position or state of mind to engage it in dialogue. It was absolutely terrifying. So much so that 40 years on, I still wake up screaming once or twice a year. We were transported back near our tent, and we lay watching this thing, afraid to move. It lifted off about like a hot air balloon and went straight up, and we were too scared to leave the tent until it had been gone for a half hour. I left the Air Force and completed college and law school. I made my living in the law. This was a secret shared between my wife and I for 40 plus years. All our kids knew was that Dad had bad nightmares, but that's it. If I had stepped forward and announced what had happened to me, it would have been the end of my legal career. I retired as an assistant attorney general for the state of Vermont in 2012, and I waited until 2018 to publish an account of what happened to us. I wrote a book, Incident at Devil's Den, and it's on Amazon. It tells the entire story, and every word of it is true. Last week I had this memory flooding back into my mind. I was a child, under 7 years old at the time. We went to Mexico to visit my dad's side of the family. He had grown up in San Luis, like in the middle of nowhere, by some mountain. I just remember there only being sand or dirt, no grass, and a bunch of cacti everywhere. Very desert looking. Anyway, when we got there, it was already late, so we went to sleep. We didn't all fit on the bed, so me and the other kids laid on a cot on the cement floor. Everyone else had already fallen asleep, but I was little and in an unfamiliar place, so I was still up and I couldn't sleep, and I was staring at the bottom of the door because there was some open space I could see outside, and it scared me. Then I started to see a bright, blinding white light, and there was a strong wind and dirt going everywhere. And the door opens and the light is so bright I could barely open my eyes to see, but I looked up to see 2 gray figures with big black eyes standing at the doorway. I got scared and I hurried up and put my head back down, closed my eyes, and I could feel them moving around at the top of my head, but I couldn't feel anything. It was so weird, I just kept my eyes closed, and the light started to fade away, and the wind started to die back down, so I opened my eyes again. The door was closed and they were gone. As a grown-up, I thought maybe it was just a dream, but it couldn't have been because I remembered the next day when I woke up during the day, I kept hearing something rolling around in my head, so I kept shaking my head and I could hear something in there. I even remember telling my mom to put her ear to my head and shaking it around and asking if she could hear it too. She just kept saying, "No, I can't hear anything, go play with the others." I'm 28 now, and I told my dad, and he believed me, which was crazy to me because he's so serious and strict, but he believed me and he said that his dad used to see them out there too all the time. He said that they had huge black eyes and that over there they used to look like balls or orbs of light. This made me think of that story with the soldiers who shot down a UFO and 3 gray aliens with big eyes emerged and merged into a shape of light and turned the soldiers into limestone. It just stood out because both were gray aliens with big eyes that could turn into a ball of light. On Monday the 3rd of September 2018 at approximately 3 a.m., I experienced the craziest thing I've ever seen in my life. I had been out all evening with friends and I got home around 12:30 in the morning. I was quite tipsy and had a couple more drinks when I got in and had a game of darts. My 15-year-old son and his 2 friends were also at my place too. They were in the living room listening to music. My back garden leads onto farmers' fields, and over the years I've heard stories of strange lights in the sky and one of a cigar-shaped UFO hovering a couple of fields away. I am a believer, but I have never once thought that I would have been the one that was in close contact with an alien, or whatever this may have been the other night. I was playing darts and my back door was open when through the corner of my eye I noticed something pass by. The light was about 6 feet tall and went straight into the living room. I thought nothing of it until about a minute later the kids asked whether I came back on my own, which I said I did, and I had already been back a couple of hours, and I said if somebody was with me they would have known already. It was then they said somebody is in the hallway. My living room has a door to the hallway with 2 glass panels in it. They said a tall shadow moved past the hallway. I searched the house upstairs and downstairs and could not find anything, by which time my son's friends who were staying the night were so freaked out a taxi was ordered and picked them up. After they left, I returned back to the kitchen and was just frozen in my tracks by kitchen utensils that just sat out in the air like somebody or something was holding them, but nothing could be seen. Whatever it was, they then put and dropped the utensils onto the kitchen surface, and as I made my way into the living room thinking, what the fuck just happened, my radio came on. I turned it off and everything seemed to return back to normal, like whatever it was had exited back out of my kitchen door into the garden where it had come from. Do not ask me what it was that I saw because I don't really know. I saw the light initially come past me from my kitchen into the living room. The kids see a figure in the hallway of the house, but nothing else. Could it be some sort of cloaking device? I don't know, but what I and the kids do know is that something entered the house and it wasn't human. If I'm feeling brave enough tomorrow, I'm thinking of staying up with my back door open and seeing if something else happens, but this time armed with a camera. I don't know, I have yet to decide, especially if I'm on my own. Like I said earlier, I'm a believer, and there's a huge part of me that wants to experience this again, but there's also a part of me that's slightly shitting myself about the unexpected, or what I could encounter. Okay, so I know this might be met with a ton of speculation, as this topic usually overwhelmingly receives. However, it's a true and raw experience that I've only reiterated to a few of my closest friends and husband. It was the summer of 2013. I was out with my friends about 10 miles from my home at their apartment and stayed up late with them until about 2 a.m. It's important to note that I had taken an afternoon nap the day leading up to these events from about 3 to 5 p.m., and we did not do anything other than smoke some weed and drink a little. At the time, being 20, and after having started dabbling at 17, it wasn't anything out of the ordinary to have a few drinks or a few puffs. Basically, I had a hefty tolerance and I wasn't seeing shit. I was not out of my mind is what I'm trying to say. In fact, more towards the realm of sober than anything else when the following took place. I left my friend's house after napping on her couch from 2 a.m. to just before 5 a.m. I was totally sober and just wanted to get home to my comfort zone, so I drove, sober. My parents owned a home in a lake community, so when I drove in on a back entrance road, I immediately was stirred in my usual go with the motions to a large black and oval shape in the distance over the lake. The road I was on was a hill that connects down to a road that spans the circumference of the lake community. So when I turned down onto that road, I saw this ship, as I described it, hovering about 100 feet off the lake through the tree line. As I turned right onto this road, it began following me at speed along the road as I traveled it. My parents' road was a sharp right off of it, so I gunned it going about 60 in a 25 because I felt an immediate feeling of needing to get out of the area, and I remember repeatedly muttering, "I'm going home, this is not happening, you won't take me, I'm going home," in a panic. I just sensed a really ominous feeling, and that this thing was otherworldly. Let me be clear, I've never had an encounter or experience such as this before. I made it home with no issue, but I do remember after I repeated that about 3 to 5 times, the thing disappeared from sight and I just hauled it the last quarter-mile home and raced to my room. I remember looking out of my bedroom window, which had a slight view of the lake during the winter, and seeing no evidence of the thing that just essentially chased me. Ever since, I've had other instances of awareness. No one really believes me, but I'm as steadfast in the belief of as the sky is blue, grass is green, and personally God is real. Is there anyone else? It's a shame I'm forced to answer anonymously. The following picture shows Sirius A, but during my experience, Sirius A was very close to the horizon due to the time, longitude, and latitude of the night. I was in my bed. I found myself outside of my body, and I went through the door, finding myself in the courtyard looking southwest. I was 26 years old. It was in southwest of France in a town called Angoulême. First of all, they told me they came to my place because I was on the same longitude than the region of the African tribe the Dogons in Mali. So now you know it didn't happen in the US. However, I checked and it was not on the same longitude, but I guess there is a reason. The word, to tell, is not right, but it helps explain things. They didn't speak in any language. They injected things into my head. There were several channels. One channel was what I saw through my eyes. Another channel was ideas that they passed to me, and another one was the control to check to see if my body was okay. I traveled to a constellation called Canis Major. It was during the night, and in order to get there, we jumped to another dimension, and they warped the universe to reach the point. It was like taking a piece of paper with 2 points on it and folding it to get to 2 points closer. So I saw an effect like in a sci-fi movie, with a planet that got bigger, and it was close to Sirius B. Then the time started to speed up. Those memories are recorded in my mind at fast speed, just like when you speed up a movie on your video player. I don't want to do sessions to find it. I was extremely scared, and at the beginning I was so scared from what I saw that I thought I would die. I don't remember what the heads of the beings looked like, but I do remember their bodies. Their skin or clothes looked like blue plastic, and their body looked so fragile that it was strange how they could stand up on Earth at all. I wonder if my brain blacked out on their faces. I remember I talked a lot with them. It's inside my brain somewhere, but I don't want to look for those memories right now. I remember they could think extremely fast, so that when I finished a question, the answer was instant. I guess they could reflect on things 4 or 5 times faster than any human being could. I also forgot to say that I wonder whether they were made of flesh because they could be made of half energy, half tangible organs, but their uniforms were tangible. I remember they told me time could be stretched and slowed down, and it could not tick at the same pace depending on the location where you could find yourself in the universe. There is another thing I'm not sure about. It was an energy cloud. It was like a very powerful explosion, almost like a nuclear explosion frozen in time, or perhaps extremely slowed down, which allowed to provide a huge amount of controlled energy. The day after this experience, I went to an astronomy website and entered my longitude, latitude, date, and time of the previous night, and I was shocked because I saw the sky that I had seen the night before. That's how I determined I saw Canis Major with Sirius A and B. Then I checked where the Dogons were located in Mali, but it didn't match my latitude. But I remembered I told myself they have an incredibly powerful energy with no CO2 footprint and no nuclear waste. This energy is linked to their molecules. I'm sorry I don't remember more. I'm Cartesian, and I think all of this could have been created by my subconscious, but nevertheless, I've never had complex dreams in my life before now. When I was around 8 years old, approximately 1995, I went to visit a friend's house just up a path and through a court from my house, about a minute away. On the court is a set of flats which creates an archway that you have to walk through. As I walked back home and through that archway, I heard a low humming noise and look over my shoulder to see a typical film-like shaped spaceship. You know, the round disc-like shape with the dome on top, with circular lighting. The lights didn't shine as such, as it was daytime, but I can only now explain them as looking like LED lights, which is why they were so noticeable in the daylight. The UFO was small, no bigger than about 3 feet and 1.5 feet in height. I think it was coming for me. At this point, I'm so scared and I started running for home. I'm about 30 seconds away and the corner to the path is just coming up. I'm still trying to watch this thing chase me, and as I get to the corner, it's just behind me and the low humming noise is deafening. I can feel it within me. I have to take my eyes off of it for a second to turn the corner, and as I do, the light, whether it was natural sunlight or the LED type lights, went really bright and it sounded like a jet plane thundering overhead. I look up. As I round the corner, it's above my head, so close the wind it created whipping up my hair. Then, just as it had suddenly appeared, it disappeared. There was no visual sign of it, but I heard that jet plane noise and low humming noise move further and further away from me. As I get home and tell my mom and dad, they don't believe me or say I must have been mistaken. They thought it was a bird or something, I guess. I told my friend the next day and she rolled on the floor laughing. I stopped telling people after that, but I can still remember it like it was yesterday, and I still can't shake the feeling that it was coming for me, even though it was so small. I don't think I would have fit inside of it. I had an experience about 15 years ago which up until now I thought was supernatural in nature. It wasn't until I saw an episode of a TV show about aliens that described events that took place on an island in Brazil in the 1970s that I started to question the nature of my experience. People living on the island were attacked by glowing balls. My experience was very similar. Now, I believe that it was an alien encounter. I've never told anyone, ever, about this experience, but it was just too weird and hard to describe. I will do my best. Firstly, the reason I thought the experience was supernatural was because at the time I was participating in a healing group and we were experimenting with multiple energy healing modalities in prayer, so I thought this was related to that activity. Anyway, late one night, I was awakened by a buzzing in my room. There were no lights in the room other than the glowing ball. It looked like a million tiny fireflies. The ball was measured about 1/3 of a meter or 18 inches in diameter. It was flying around my bedroom, bouncing off the walls in an irregular pattern. Then, suddenly, the ball came towards me, very quickly, and hit me directly in the chest. It hit me so hard that I fell back on the bed. The feeling I had was just like when your foot falls asleep. Pins and needles and very intense. My mind struggled between wondering whether I should relax and allow this to happen, or struggle and fight back. After about 5 minutes, I came to the decision and the clear thought was, I want to live. It erupted in my consciousness. As soon as I had that thought, which somehow felt like it came physically out of my heart, the ball of light left me and the bedroom. I've never been visited by it again. Also, I was living near the sea, just like the Brazilians on the island affected by the attacking of balls of light. However, my experience was not harmful. Perhaps they've adjusted the strength of their alien X-rays. Seriously, I don't know what it was, but the experience was very real. I hope this has helped someone understand their experience better. Although I've never been face to face with an alien themselves, I've seen an alien ship before. In the summer of 2006, around 9 p.m., I was driving with an employee down a one-lane road in the northeast corner of New Jersey, in an area considered part of Mahwah but in the middle of nowhere. We were delivering furniture, but we were a bit lost in a rural area of private unnamed roads. I was looking for a place where I could turn around with the trailer I was pulling, when the forest around us suddenly got bright as if it were daytime. I stopped the van, very confused. We looked up and saw a triangle-shaped craft maybe 50 feet up, moving very slowly, less than 20 miles per hour. The lights on the craft were definitely too small to light up the forest like that, but the light was definitely coming from the aircraft. The craft made a robotic sound as it lit up the inside of the cab of the van, simultaneously scanning me and my employee. I don't know how else to describe it, but we were definitely their focus for about 2 seconds, during which they scanned us for some sort of informational purpose, I guess. As soon as they lit up the cab, we both knew that they wanted to know more information about us. It didn't hurt, nor was there a physical feeling of the scan. Then the craft just zipped away, accelerating faster than would be possible for any Earth aircraft. When it went away, and my employee and I assured each other of what we both had just seen, I looked at my phone and saw 90 minutes of missed calls from the customer. The whole encounter with the alien craft from the moment the forest lit up to the time it zipped away lasted about maybe 15 seconds. We found her house and she was very angry since it was now very late. We unloaded her furniture and then just drove back to NYC in silence. Back in the 80s, I was on a long barefoot hike in the Cumberland Mountains with my friend Scott. He rode me there on the back of his Ducati, and then we scaled a canyon, climbed a mountain, and watched the sunset. On the night hike back down at the top of Rainbow Falls, we saw across the creek, Middle Creek, a glowworm glowing by a cliff. We crossed Middle Creek straight to it and checked it out. A few seconds later, Scott saw the UFO, and then I saw it as well. He freaked out, and I tried to calm him down, but when the UFO moved towards us, we both screamed like chimpanzees. I remember being so freaked. It got to about 30 feet away and was glowing white like a tube light. It was about 10 feet wide, shaped like Saturn. We were stuck in place, screaming wildly, then a front porch swing appeared on a flat rock, and a down-angled spotlight across Middle Creek. It was like morphine. We completely calmed down and were saying, "Oh, it's just a front porch swing. It's just a swing." I went from being the most freaked out that I'd probably ever been to completely calm in 1 second. I remember stepping into the creek and helping Scott down so he could sit on the swing. At that point, my memory splits. The next thing I know, we're making the dangerous night climb down the cliffs around the falls, knowing nothing of a UFO. Only about 6 months later did I start having flashbacks to what had happened, but of course I told no one. 2 years after that, I ended up telling my friend Sheldon. He said he knew someone with the same story. He introduced me to Joe, and Joe said he was on Middle Creek at night with a friend, and they saw a glowworm off the trail. They went to it and then saw a strobe burst, and when they got back to their car, it was hours later than it should have been. He said later that he started having flashbacks as well, but his memories took him onto the craft and included sperm extraction. If I hadn't met Joe and heard the same story, same creek, same year, you would have never have read this because I wouldn't have believed it. I was a security policeman stationed at Minot and worked in the missile fields of North Dakota. There were several incidents of friends having encounters with UFOs. They had reported things like cattle looking like an autopsy to UFOs going over their campers at missile silos. One day I was riding back from a missile site with my supervisor. He told me there was a UFO that had landed, and the Air Force, state troopers, and sheriff deputies had it on lockdown. He said that he had seen it, and it was on the way back to base, the way we were headed. I asked if we could stop by, and he said sure. Sure as shit, as we were coming close to the main road heading to Canada, he pulled onto a gravel entrance, and there it was. It was long, cylinder-shaped like a cigar. It was dark, so they had lights shining on it. Only the center section was visible. There were people dressed like cops, and some were in military uniform. 2 guys approached. One guy said to my supervisor, "I told you to never come back." My supervisor then told him that I insisted that we'd stop. I asked the man if I could go on board. The other man told me that everyone who went on board had to have an injection so they didn't remember what they had seen. I said, "I want to go on board. I'll take the injection." They took me over to a table, which I had to sign some papers, and I still don't remember what the papers said. The administrators talked about giving me the shot. One official did not want me to take the shot because it caused strokes and dementia around the age 50, and the government would have to pay me disability. He asked why I wanted to go on board, and I wouldn't remember anything. I told him it would be in my subconscious. After much debate, they agreed to let me go on board. They gave me the shot and said it would take effect in about 20 minutes. He instructed his staff to get me off board before that. I walked up to the aircraft. It had rivets like an old aircraft and portholes like a Navy ship. I started up the steps. The next thing I remembered was being back in my supervisor's truck. He told me to wake up and look out the window. I looked up and there was the UFO flying about 100 feet over our heads. I started to open the door to get a better look, but my supervisor grabbed me and told me he was doing 70 miles per hour. I could see a cockpit or some lights on the UFO's side. The aircraft made a quick stationary 90-degree turn, going the same direction we were going, and then took off like a rocket, with no engine flames. My supervisor told me I could not report it. He said the airbase would think I was crazy and would mentally discharge me, so I kept my mouth shut. I heard reports the next day that the aircraft security police on Minot reporting seeing a UFO. A week later, a C-130 tanker aircraft exploded on base. The Air Force aircraft cops said there was a UFO hovering above it before it blew. The Air Force blamed it on the crew member, saying he forgot to connect a static line and static electricity caused it to blow. I've now thought about this for 40 years. I wonder if those were really state troopers, deputies, and Air Force personnel at the UFO site, or could they have been some foreign personnel working on the downed aircraft, or even aliens dressed as humans themselves? Could this have been a downed foreign aircraft or a UFO? I guess I'll never know, but now, yes, I've had a stroke and do have some dementia, maybe caused by the injection. I know my story is true, and it was the strangest thing to ever happen to me in my 20 years at the Air Force. Be careful, they may be out there.